Founder Culture, the podcast for founders and startup leaders who understand that building a business may be hard, but building a team, now that's where things get tricky. I'm Romaine Wright, founder of Just Right Consulting LLC and creator of Thrive or Derive. In every episode, I take one real team issue, break down the behaviors driving it, and provide strategies on how to fix it. Welcome to the show. So for this final episode of season 2, I'm drawing from one of my all-time favorite TV shows, the US version of The Office. Now, if you've never seen the show or you're not a fan of the show, that's okay. You'll still be able to keep up with me as I just use one of the characters as an illustration of my point. So, without any further ado, today's episode is called, Am I a Michael Scott? Let's jump in with the story. So Michael Scott is the regional manager of the Scranton branch of Dunder Mifflin. Now on this show, we see the day-to-day challenges his team faces by working for him. He derails meetings, he tells offensive jokes and stories, he is more concerned with being liked than getting work done, and he has zero boundaries between his work life and his personal life. And yet, the branch continues to perform. At one point in the show, Scranton actually becomes the most profitable branch in the company, and the CFO sends Michael to other branches to do lectures on success. Now, I've got to point out that Michael is also a top-tier salesman. He knows the industry, he knows the clients, he closes deals. Sometimes they're very big deals. And that's what makes this character so interesting. His shortcomings are substantial, and his behavior and leadership continually puts the company at risk. And yet nothing ever forces him to change. The Scranton branch gets results, and those results protect Michael's behavior. And that is what makes Michael Scott more realistic than you might think. So that's the thread I'm using. If you're familiar with the show, you know I could have went in several directions talking about or exploring Michael Scott as a leader, but this is the path that we're taking for this episode. So what's the challenge? Poor leadership is easy to spot when things aren't going well, when there's failings and lots of mistakes. It's much harder to spot when the work is getting done, the team is delivering, and the leader is personally contributing to the bottom line. Now, as a leader, you might think that your team's success is validation of your effectiveness as a leader. It's proof, it's evidence. But in reality, team success is not always a true measure of leadership. Sometimes, like with Michael Scott, a high-performing team can actually mask ineffective leadership. So let me tell you, I'm not just sharing this because I took it from the show. I have lived this, right? I have firsthand experience of being on a high-performing team that is masking ineffective leadership. I've actually been on more than one of those teams. And in one case, my team had an 80% turnover rate over the course of 2 years because we couldn't handle dealing with the ineffective leader. And with that loss of 80% of the team, the company lost decades of industry knowledge and specialized skills. So that's the cost of not managing or having a leader that's showing up the way that they need to and a team actually taking up the slack for them. So this is actually bigger of a deal than you may think. And so I want you to explore yourself as you're listening to this. Let's talk now about the behavior, and then I'll tell you how to fix it. So this behavior, right? What's going on when we see, again, a high-performing, talented, experienced team masking ineffective leadership? It's called outcome bias. Outcome bias is the tendency to judge the quality of leadership by the result instead of the process used to get that result. And when this is happening, these leaders, right, these ineffective leaders who are kind of riding the coattails of their teams, they may say things like this: we hit our goals, so I must be leading well. Or the team figured it out, so everything's fine. or nothing seems broken, so the system is working, or we're performing, there can't be a leadership issue, right? All those things are usually said when someone finally raises their hand and says, I can't deal with this. This leader needs some coaching, some development, something, right? This is not working. And usually you hear those things from those leaders. My team is excelling. How can that mean that I'm not a good as a leader? I must be a good leader if my team's doing well. And it's not always true. Here's the thing, right? Team performance, team outcome, and results can be misleading. When your team is doing well, it may not mean that you're such a great leader. It may mean that the talented people on your team are filling in the gaps. It could also mean that they are quietly overextending themselves, working extra hours, taking on things that aren't their responsibility, that might even be your responsibility, and so covering up the inefficiencies that you're exhibiting and the deficiencies that you're exhibiting. Also, they may be doing well because you're giving vague instructions, making vague decisions, and they're interpreting it as it comes down and figuring it out because they're experienced and talented and they know what needs to be done. So again, your ability and effectiveness as a leader is not always directly correlated to the performance of your team. Now let's revisit Michael Scott for a moment. A great example of outcome bias is shown in the episode called The Fight. In this episode, Michael Scott needs to sign the weekly time cards, monthly purchase orders, and quarterly expense reports all on the same day. They call it the perfect storm, that it happens, I believe, once a year, that he's got to sign all these things on the same day. He procrastinates all day long, even practices his signature on scraps of paper instead of signing the actual documents. And at the end of the day, the team has to come together and they forge his signature on these documents to get them out on time so they make it to corporate and everyone's fine. And it gets done, and it gets done on time, but at what cost? Really? Like, at what cost? So, the good news, as with everything, there's always a way to fix it. So what's the reset for outcome bias? The reset for outcome bias is examining where your team's success is really coming from, right? Because it's not coming from you. And even if you're doing well as a leader, it still isn't coming from you, right? It's coming from the team. So here are 4 steps to examine where your team's success is truly coming from. The first one starts with looking at the process, not just the step-by-step, but the dynamics around it. Asking questions like, was the path from A to B clear? Were expectations clear and understood? Did people know who owned what and what was rework needed, right? Did we need to go back and do things over and over and over? Because those types of questions will help you identify whether or not the process is clearly defined, because that's your job as a leader to do. And if it isn't clearly defined, you need to know that. Number 2 is to notice gaps, right? When you've examined the process, you'll see what those gaps are. Some things for you to watch for, though, are repeated requests for clarification. Are people constantly coming back to you asking more questions than you think they should? That's a sign. You can also watch out for the same few people carrying the bulk of the load. Also look for your team being frustrated or completing work begrudgingly. I can definitely say in my experience, even doing work that I love, when I'm reporting to or when I reported to an ineffective leader, there was some resentment, even though I enjoyed the work. It was like, this person's riding my tails. They're being praised and taking credit for my work. And even though I love this work, I don't want to do it because I don't like that dynamic. And then another thing, finally, you can look for is your team regularly having to interpret what it is you're telling them to do. So if they're continually saying, don't worry, I'll figure it out, That's a sign. All of those are signs that you need to examine your leadership more deeply. Number 3, separate your talent from your leadership. So being great at the work and being a good leader are not the same thing. They're two totally separate skill sets. Now, very often you're a leader, entrepreneur, it's because you were good at the work. You started a business doing the work, or you were promoted from doing the work, and now you're leading people. You can't assume that just because you were good at the work, you're going to automatically be a good leader. So you need to separate those two and really evaluate your leadership. And one of the ways to do that is number 4, asking for feedback and input continually, regularly, not just when things go wrong. Don't wait for the failure. Don't wait for the big mistake. On a regular basis, ask your team things like, what feels harder than it should? What is unclear, but you tolerate? What can I do better to support your work? And is there something we need to make our work more efficient? Right? So it's a process and you've got to take the ego out of it, right? Because again, just because your team's doing well doesn't always mean that you are doing well as a leader. So let's look at it this way. Michael Scott is not a memorable character because he's incompetent. We see him do well and have pockets of genius across the show. So he's not memorable because he's incompetent. He's memorable because he succeeds just enough to avoid changing his behavior. And if you've never watched the show, when you watch it, look out for this, right? He does just enough to still be allowed to show up the way he shows up and to not have to change. And I know it's a television show, but it is a real illustration and metaphor for what really happens in an office, which is why it's such a good show. Michael Scott is a reminder that collective success can be camouflaged for leadership deficiencies. And some leadership problems don't look like failure. Here's the thing. Some leadership problems actually look like success. So if this resonated with you, whether you're on a team with an ineffective leader or you're a leader thinking, oh, I need to figure out if that's me, hop in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, leave your comments, share your thoughts. And if you realize, hey, this really might be me and I need some help, my contact information is in the show notes. Reach out to me, connect with me. Let's explore how you can go to the next level as a leader and not be a Michael Scott. And so as I close season 2, until next time or until season 3, build trust and results will follow.